We'll now call today's budget meeting to order for Saturday, June 5th. Mr. Tonelli, I believe the last time around we didn't get to Public Works. That's the final remaining department to cover.
Correct.
And then the bulk of the meeting is dedicated to community input. Is that what everyone recalls from our last meeting?
So do we still get to go back over things we might need to discuss or miss, or anything that we felt that should have been changed? Okay.
Yes, we can still get that input, but we always try to offer a meeting for the residents to weigh in.
Okay.
So perhaps after we hear from the residents, then we can come back with some additional edits.
Okay.
Because we still have time for adjustments.
Okay. All right.
Yep. So Mr. Tonelli, do you want to walk us through?
Sure. Rick, can you pass some control to me so I can share my screen?
You have it already.
Oh, thank you. And you're right, I did have it already. Sorry about that. What do we see here? Agenda?
We see Public Works actuals versus budget FY22 proposed.
Okay. That's not what I'm seeing here, but okay, that's good. Okay, here we go. Okay, so same format as last time. I haven't changed the first column, which is a third quarter actuals, even though we have through April now. I'm just trying to be consistent right now. So first column is a third quarter actual. This is through the end of March. And it's a good benchmark because that's a 3/4 of the year point, and that's just easier for accounting and budgeting when you have 3/4 versus through April, which is like 83% of the year gone. It's just a little easier to see things line by line. Next column is the FY21, the current budget, percentage of budget used for Public Works. And in the blue column is the FY22 proposed budget. And this is based, and the proposed is, as we've discussed about, based on trends and what we plan on for next year. And also from some budget discussions that we've already had for the last, I want to say 3 budget work sessions. Is that correct? May 3rd, 10th. So yes. So we'll go through this, and please stop me at any point if you have any questions, because I have a tendency just to talk and talk and talk unless, you know, and I'm staring here and you're all over here. So if you raise your hand, I'm probably not going to see it. So just go ahead and speak up, or, you know, let the mayor know, or, you know, somebody please chime in. Compensation. Now this is for, we have 5 public works crew. That's our Public Works crew. We have the Public Works supervisor, along with 2 Public Works classification 2 employees, 2 Public Works classification 1 employees. And the regular pay, as we talked about with other departments, includes a 2% COLA and 2% merit as a placeholder for now, unless anything else comes up. Overtime. This is what we've averaged more or less with overtime throughout the year. It's been a little bit less the last couple of years because we haven't had as many weather-related events as we've had in previous years when I first started. So we've been very, very fortunate. But it's also for events as well that we have after hours and on weekends. And anytime we have an event, we try to keep at least 1 or 2 Public Works people on staff, because, you know, they're the ones responsible for the setup, breakdown, and so forth, and also overall management or supervision as well. Also part of the compensation is FICA, which is your Social Security tax that everybody has to pay, and the town matches that 7.65%. Health insurance, and this is based on current enrollments. And we have a 6% increase in for health insurance, but it really doesn't pick up until December 1 when the plan renews. And we've been fortunate. We've been single-digit increases over the years. So we've been very fortunate with that. And we've even gotten rebates from the health insurance premiums because our plans has been underutilized. but that's realized up in revenues. Pension, we're part of the Maryland State Retirement System, and this is the requirement, the town required contribution to the pension system based on the staff's salary. Doesn't include overtime, just based on salary. And also workers' comp. It's the second highest rating for the town, the highest rating being obviously public safety, but public works is the second highest rating just because of the hazardous nature of the work. So the compensation overall only increased by 3% over a previous fiscal year, and that's based on really when you net out the staff increases against a little bit of savings on health insurance based on changes in enrollment. So we have an increase of 3% budgeted for FY22. Now we get into the general administrative expenses. We added the tuition reimbursement here based on last month's discussion. We had $7,000 here. This is something new on since the last draft of the budget. Uniforms, this is for the work and safety gear. Also uniforms, and we're playing around with doing a monthly uniform expense to offset, because our guys go out and buy their own clothes. So, and we would reimburse them. Now we're just looking at like what we do with public safety, maybe going towards like a monthly uniform reimbursement for replacement. It's still the same amount of money. It's just a little bit less administrative work here, and gives the staff a little bit more flexibility to get what they want when they can, because they do go through their gear quite a bit, obviously. Professional development. This is something that I think we talked about last time, but we added in for tuition reimbursement, but we didn't change anything really for professional development. Again, what we talked about last month's meeting, the chief said with the, I think it's a police one training, if that's correct, chief, there's also some safety and administrative trainings on there that we could take advantage of, but we still need to send the guys to like the OSHA 40s training and refresher course and hazmat materials. And I think Chief talked about at last meeting, I think they've had their airborne or bloodborne pathogens training, I want to say already, but things like that. So I'm trying to keep them updated. And those are good things that, to do, and Pernell can jump in. Those are good things to do during the winter time when the days are shorter, obviously. So try to get the trainings in. I'll pick up some of the larger items. Fuel, we've been fortunate, even with the increases. It's basically for in-town fuel, but it's also for taking trips out to the dump that we have to do every week as well. So that's for our trucks, off-road equipment, mowers, everything. Vehicles repair and maintenance, it's getting expensive as the fleet ages, and I'll get down into the capital purchases, what we're looking at as well. But as the fleet ages, we're starting to see, especially on heavier trucks versus cars, anytime you have a repair, it's 2 to 3 times the amount easy, just because of heavier components. So we're starting to see an increase there. I still think that current budget should be okay. It's just sometimes repairs happen all at once. You don't see them for a while, and all of a sudden they all happen at once, and it's kind of like a sticker shock, like, oh geez, really? So it's I think Pernell hears me grunting and groaning every time something breaks over here. So it's because it's it's at least $1,000 expense every time, but it's no fault of their own. It's just aging equipment, and it's used every day, all the time. Equipment maintenance is the same thing. I'm sorry, that is more just for the off-road equipment and mowers. We try to keep those separate because they're used just as much. Also for our bobcats, our salt machines that go on the back of the trucks, and also for repairs to our leaf machine or anything else in trailers. Building maintenance. We keep this high. Last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, we've been under budget here. And I did take about 10% off of this budget. I'm still not comfortable with doing that, even though we've been underspent for the last 2 to 3 years. The reason is we have some we have aging buildings. And, gosh forbid, we have like a major roof problem. That's going to eat up just half of that right there. And we're already looking at, Purnell's already getting quotes on doing the roof here for Town Hall. And that would take up half that budget right there, because it's a flat roof. And then and it covers the police station, Town Hall, the admin part. Also in there is for anything that happens mechanical wise, plumbing, electrical, water heaters, drains back up, blockages. We had to deal with one down at Mango Cafe last year. This is also for upkeep and maintenance of the Bostwick property, Public Works property. So there's a lot of properties in here, and unfortunately, they're all aging properties. So I kept it at 50,000. Thankfully, we haven't had any major issues. But I like to keep that in there just because we do have some associated risk with having several aging properties. Everybody okay so far? Thumbs up? Okay.
Yes, I've been trying to watch the boxes for any raised hands.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
No
I appreciate
problem.
it. Can everybody see the screen okay? Or do I need to increase it?
No, it's good.
Rick, does it look good on your side?
Yeah, it looks fine. Okay.
I'll bump it a little bit more. Grounds maintenance. This is everything except for buildings. I'd like to say it's, Ms. Lundy, do you have a question?
You're muted, Councilmember Lundy. It looks like you were talking.
Thank you, Mayor James.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Once you finish with the ground maintenance, I do have a comment there.
Okay, do you want me to keep going and then come back to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that'll work. Grounds maintenance, again, is everything that's not going on with the buildings. So that is, I'd like to say our beautification efforts. Any kind of landscaping, plantings, anything to do with the parks. It's kind of like a catch-all that is, because we take care of, I forget how many parks that we have in town, and we also take care of the grounds maintenance for State Highway through an MOU out at 450, out of the Peace Cross area. And it's a lot of work. And also as part of the grounds maintenance is the roads maintenance as well. And the roads maintenance includes like what Purnell and the guys are doing right now. It's a big job every year, and it's an expensive job, and it's more expensive now because of the cost of materials, is the curb spraying. To spray the yellow curbs throughout the town. Just talking with Purnell yesterday, I think, it just seems like there's miles and miles of them. And also paint the crosswalks as well. So anything on the grounds, this is what's captured here in the budget. And if there's anything roads related at the end of the year, we apply this against what we should receive for highway user revenues, if that makes sense. It's expensed here, but realized up in the revenues as highway user revenues earned or accrued, because we still have the expense. Okay, so the expense goes here. And also in here is road signs, replacements for that, concrete for the base of the road signs, fence repairs, just about everything that's not attached to a building. So if that makes sense. And mulchings and path maintenance. So any kind of clearing as well. So Councilmember Lundy, go back to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tonelli.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to add, excuse me, add under 6720. I want to add painting of park equipment.
Add what?
Painting of
Okay.
park of equipment. I know.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Working with Mr. Purnell, we were talking about that, and he had mentioned the cost of that, and so I just wanted to ask him. And I'm thinking we need to increase that FY22 budget line item, not only in grounds maintenance, but in building maintenance based on everything we have to do. I don't know if you all have prior invoices, so we can kind of itemize the cost of these things or the estimated cost of doing these type of things, so that we won't run into we don't have the money or it costs so much. So I would just lean more towards Mr. Purnell. Do he think that $20,000 is enough to take care of everything you've spoken about, and with me adding the painting of the park equipment as well as the structures, because it's a special type of paint that is required, which would be a good cost, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Lundy. Mr. Hall, do you mind sharing your thoughts on those items?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Good morning. As Councilmember Lundy was talking about, I want to piggyback on it. The type of paint and the equipment that's out there, you will have to have a company that will have to do a job task like that to perform that type of paint. And some of that equipment to get painted, they might have to break it down and take it to their shop. Some may have to be dipped and powder coated, because it's an insurance policy, and the town is liable for any chip paint when you don't do it right. The first step of preparing and prepping on any type of surface that's going to be powder coated, sandblasted, clear coated, it has to be done through a company. I think that the $20,000 wouldn't be enough to continue on our ground maintenance and add the park painting of all the equipment in there. I think you would need to add about another $10,000 or $12,000 to line item 6720.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. And then, so that was line item 6720. Councilmember Lundy was also asking about 6710 for the building maintenance, and I share her concern as well, just given the number of properties that the town owns and the fact that they're aging structures. Do you think 50K is enough for all of those, and including the public works warehouse as well, or based on the work that's being done and the repairs you all have had to do you think we need to increase there?
Well, I mean, we need to increase there, but it depends on what broad scope of work are we planning on doing to the buildings, and then we can know what to increase. Now, if we're just talking about maintenance of the building, I'm pretty comfortable with the 50,000. That's just maintenance. Now, when we're getting in the scope of work of repairing, replacing roofs, AC units, ductwork, which is a common thing that needs to be done, that we need to do. It's painful. It'll be a part of relocation to the police department, but that is something that needs to be done, and you need to probably add to do something like that with the roofs and everything. You're probably going to need to jump up by another 30,000. So that'll bring line item 6710 to 80,000.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hall. So I just want to ask Councilmember Blunt and Councilmember Lundy, based on what Mr. Hall said, I totally understand and agree with that assessment, but want to get your input.
Councilmember Rout, my hand was raised.
Oh, Councilmember Rout, I did not see you connected to the meeting. It was only showing Councilmember Blunt and Lundy. So my apologies for that. Over to you, Councilmember Rout.
Thank you so much, Mayor James. Good morning, everyone. I bid you greetings from Belize. I am deeply concerned when I hear these estimations as it relates to we're estimating a lot. We don't have any particular quotes. To me, it sounds like a lot of hearsay, which supports my further understanding and speaking to my Ward 1 residents. I have received telephone calls and written correspondence as it relates to the director position. In this position, not to say Mr. Hall is not doing a phenomenal job, but I think that in speaking to some of the residents in Ward 1, by which I represent, and they have shared their concerns, it takes an adequate level of understanding as it relates to the buildings, it relates to the trajectory of how we are moving. And I want to really impress upon my colleagues that we should be considering that director position coming back into this budget. I know it's been absent at least for 2 to 3 years. We removed it, but with these estimations or guesstimations, there will take a presentation of looking at our scope and our landscape so that we can be able to plan over the next 4, 5 fiscal years to be able to adequately onboard different things in a strategic manner. Understanding, I've heard a lot this morning, duct maintenance, air conditioned roof. It doesn't sound like we have adequate proposals and understanding where we need to be so that we can adequately plan. Given that, I definitely would like to request that my colleagues consider inputting that director position back in this budget. In addition to 4 foremen, this team does phenomenal work, and I often see them overworked. They are out picking trash, they are out building structures, they are out repairing. And it was also brought to my attention from my residents that I represent that we used to have at least 2 more people on the team. I would like to see I add another foreman onto this team to equalize the work, because I do support Councilmember Lundy's suggestion. When we're looking at, we've received public comment, I know over the last 2 years, that we're looking at our signs. They are severely chipped, and that's a representation. If we're talking about redevelopment, attracting new residents, businesses, the town of Bladensburg signs should not be chipped and outlaid. We should have, some estimations on what it's going to take to give a new coat of fresher paint. So I would definitely like to see a director position, a foreman position, in addition to additional, we have to do something with our beautification projects and a more concrete estimation of what we need. As far as we can't just, I don't feel comfortable saying, oh, 20,000 for a roof, 10,000 for this. We need some actual figures and a proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Rout. And as we do with our other budget line items, we put in figures to cover anticipated expenses. And I appreciate you saying before we move down a path, we need estimates and so forth. The whole goal of the building maintenance line item is to ensure that as repairs come up, that we have funding available to cover those expenses. Not that we know we need to replace a new roof and the specific things. I believe Mr. Hall was giving us some examples. And so if the council wants to keep the line item at 50K and just deal with maintenance as we go along. And then of course, when the work has to be done, the staff has to do their due diligence with getting the appropriate RFPs. I can certainly understand that. But I do want to agree with Councilmember Rout, because I was actually talking to Mr. Hall a few weeks ago and inquiring about the level of work that I've observed and other residents have observed and the manpower. and asked him just to tell me honestly, does he feel that there's a need? Because my opinion is that they're understaffed, but I wanted his input. And so Mr. Hall was very candid and saying, yes, we need help. Again, I wanted to talk to him as the foreman and get his perspectives on that. And so adding staff here, I 100% agree with you, because we all know how hard they work and we see it. But as hard as they work, there's still more work that needs to be done, and we can't overlook that. And so as was stated earlier, we want to help make sure that we're supporting this area, because the town is judged by the look. The town is judged by the cleanliness. And so if we need to invest more here, I 100% support that recommendation. And as was mentioned earlier, the director position was out there a few years ago. If you all are in agreement, then yes, let's bring that back. But I also think we need someone on the ground who's actually rolling up their sleeves and doing the work. We need that leader, the strategic direction for the department, but we also need someone who can be there and managing the workload. So Mr. Hall, just as it relates to the manpower, would you mind commenting on your perspectives on what the needs are for your team?
Sure, Mayor. As you said, the director position is a nice pattern to go, but when you put in a director position, most of these directors are not doing grant writing or anything like that, development and everything. That's really not part of, I'm not gonna say you'll be wasting money to go out there that position. That position requires a lot of money. 70 to 80,000 is not gonna bring you in a good, solid director that's gonna grant write, that's gonna do this, that's gonna do that, that's gonna do development, and also go to all these webinars, exceptions, and do all that, and be out here too. As Mayor said, we need somebody that's going to physically, laborly put in the feet on the ground, put their hands in the dirt, get out in the snow, get out in the rain, get out in the storm, tornadoes. That's the type of help that we're leaning more towards. A director position right at the moment, I don't think will be feasible for what we need as manpower. Manpower, I think we would need 2 full-time employees. That way we can be back to almost full staff. And maybe on down the road, if we get broader in our scope of work that we are allowed to do in the town and everything, then you may want to bring in the public works director. But now if you bring in the public works director, he kind of going to be looking at it like, what am I doing? Y'all don't, you know, it's just a whole broad a picture when you bring in the public works director.
Thank you, Mr. Hall, but and we definitely appreciate your impact, your remarks on that. So Mr. Tonelli, though, and Councilmember Lundy and Councilmember Blunt, I know you all didn't say anything, but I was just trying to watch the body language. It seems like the will of the council is that we do need to increase manpower for the Public Works Department. And so we would like to see, are you all comfortable adding 2 positions there? One director position as well as a line employee. And over to you, Councilmember Rout.
Thank you so much. I do think that a director position is needed to lead a team. And we can build that into we can ask the new town administrator, whoever that may be, to build that into the position description. I do think that the team needs to be led by somebody who is as active as our current supervisor. I also think that in addition to, I'm very familiar with budgets. I manage 42 million on my own, on my regular job, but there has to be adequate proposals and services and a trajectory where we need to go. Given Chief Collington's leadership, he was able to tell us, okay, this is what this is the figure that I researched. This is what it's going to take for us to move it so we can reduce the crime, given that as an example. I do think it takes a skilled level and a skilled person to be able to lead that. And so given this budget process, I don't feel comfortable adding figures in the building maintenance line items that we have not adequately researched. In addition, Mr. Hall, I do support what you said. There are a lot of grants out there for small towns such as the town of Bladensburg that we can be able to get. I know Pepco just released a grant. I think it's closed now as it relates to outdoor opportunities, so enhancing outdoor spaces. It would have been nice that we could have had a director to apply for that on our behalf, in addition to, or a grant writer, but given our limited staff, I don't think that it was appropriate to bring that up for our staff to be able to get that application together. But there are grants, there are services that the state has. We have some irrigation issues that are pretty significant that impact residents. That director would need to be able to lead us in the right direction so that we would be able to adequately plan. So I do think that at this time, we have a need to add a director position that is hands-on in addition to a foreman. I yield back.
Thank you, Councilmember Rao. And I do believe with the new town administrator coming in that they could definitely prioritize filling that director position with someone who has the education experience, whether they're an engineer or have just that sort of background to help us address some of the stormwater management issues, some of our infrastructure issues, and even really helping us hone in on a very strong street improvement plan. I know our current staff has started on that path of getting it together, but again, with some deeper education and expertise on the engineering side, or even experience if they've worked their way up to that level, it could really help our residents in terms of the added value that they could bring to that process. But I want to move over. Chief Collington, I did see your hand. Oh, Chief, you're on mute.
Good morning, Mayor, council members, colleagues, and residents. If I could just chime in, and I definitely agree with both sides of the issue as it relates to the director's positions, former position, and just the manpower at with Public Works. But I do strongly suggest considering that director's position, because again, you will have someone would have that expertise in infrastructure assessments, has some engineering experience, budget writing experience, beautification of the town, moving us into the 21st century, grant writing, as well as just having that oversight and forthwith to move the Public Works needs and address the council's priorities and the residents' priorities as it relates to the best services that can be provided to the town. So that, as well as the economic development piece there. So you would definitely have to have someone with that skill set to, give us what we need, especially the residents as well as the council's priorities. But I do agree with Mr. Hall and his current team. I do believe that they have gone above and beyond and have really reached across to try to make sure that all of the town's needs were met. But when you're talking about taking it to a higher level, I do strongly recommend considering a director's position.
Thank you, Chief. And then Mr. Tonelli, the other concern I had with the Public Works budget was as it relates to the vehicles. There's one pickup truck, actually there's two that are not in the best shape, but one in particular where the body of the vehicle is rusting out. And when that town seal is on vehicles driving through the community, that is not a good representation of the town and our staff. And I definitely feel like we need to invest if we can't do both pickup trucks, or, Mr. Hall, you weigh in on what type of vehicles, but I do feel like we need a vehicle replacement plan for PW, similar to what we have for the police department, because again, Public Works, they're out there and putting, their hands on every street in town, dealing with biohazards, as we talked about when we were talking about the professional development. And so I do strongly feel we need to have some money set aside for rebuilding that fleet over time, even if it's just one this first fiscal year, and we reassess if there's savings, toward the end of the calendar or fiscal year, and we can do an additional vehicle.
Can I say something about the just a different perspective, going back to the Public Works Director position?
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Tonelli.
I'm probably not going to have a popular view here, but I just most Public Works Directors positions I see in when there's a larger scope of services, like if towns have their own municipal water and waste systems as well, because those are big separate entities that, you have underground piping and systems, mechanical systems, wells, wastewater treatment plants. We do have a town engineer that we're on a contract basis with. And going back to Councilmember Rout's concerns, just to tossing it out there. I mean, if there's anything major, I would think that, we could bring in a town engineer on because their firm has civil and mechanical engineers. So we're using them on an as needed basis. And we don't have to increase this budget right now for building maintenance. I mean, if we go through and when we identify specific needs, or we absolutely have to do something that's going to cost $30,000 to $40,000, we can take the time to do that and get the quotes, bring it back. And if we have the money, or we can identify other funds, Councilmember Rouse, you said there could be grant opportunities out there or something. We can come back maybe with a budget amendment, so almost on an as needed pay-go basis versus just, dropping in and increasing the budget on things we're not 100% sure about yet, even though, we want to be conservative and have it in there. But, going back to the director's position, that is a big administrative position to bring on. Maybe, that can be done, as you all said, when, we fill the other administrative positions, see how things fall into place. And then a new town administrator was, could do a needs analysis, and then maybe add it to the budget later. But that's just my thoughts, because I'm already looking at, trying to cover everything that we have now. So I'm just going a little bit more conservative route here. Again, it might not be the most popular, but, I just want to put that out there for consideration.
Yeah, definitely appreciate those thoughts as well, Mr. Tonelli. And I think part of the perspective that we as council members have, or members of the town council, is that we're looking ahead.
Yeah.
So not at just what this position can do today, but ultimately, I would love to see the town providing our own trash services and having that as part of our public works offerings. We're granting better services, not depending on some third party to provide that for us. And so in thinking ahead and how, as Councilmember Blunt often says, how we can do more for our residents, that's where we're trying to move to.
Understood.
But I totally understand. Let's do the needs assessment if everyone's on board with that. But I think there's certainly agreement that we do want to see. We appreciate the current leadership. Can't take any away from that, but we want to take it to the next level and get that director position in there. So with that in mind, I just want to make sure so we can plug the appropriate edits in the budget. Is there agreement for another inline employee at this time? And then we do the needs assessment. So at least we're making an informed decision about what exactly we need in that director position and build that job description out appropriately. And then we'll have a town administrator who can drive forward that hiring process. Is that okay with the council for now?
Mayor James?
Yes, Councilmember Rout.
I do think I agree with you, building in that town administrator and the foreman position. But I also wanted to bring up, because public maintenance is a part of a COVID-19 response, I'm very interested in seeing if we can get a vehicle out of that 7.8 million because of the need to carry equipment. It's a stretch, it's a real stretch, but carry equipment and prepare our town for cleanliness as a COVID response. So I do definitely agree with you. I see the rusty vehicles. I think about 2 to 3 of them need to be replaced, but I would really like to see, they haven't released that capital outlay guidance yet. I would really like to see if we could push hard on moving that capital outlay to that category. I don't know, it's definitely a stretch, but.
So thank you, that's a good point. And as of now, we don't currently have anything, right, in capital outlay for public works.
Right.
And I believe if
Actually, we do.
Oh, we do. Okay, because I
Yeah.
was going to say, if we put it, the question is, if we put the number in the budget, sometimes you can't use the grant money for something that's budgeted.
Right.
And so we may have to take that out if it is in fact in there. And as Councilmember Rout said, go the route of utilizing the grant funding. And then the other aspect to consider is if there's an emergency situation and a vehicle dies and we have to make a purchase that we, as you said before, if we have to do a budget amendment to use savings from another area to pull, we'll have that flexibility. But I think you're right. Let's try to use that federal money for this purpose. Okay, so, and the other thing that I had wanted to bring up here is it's been noted about entering the town. How do you know you're here? And yes, we have some signs, but could we do something more like, I hate to use Bowie as an example, but they do a nice job with the nice bushes that spell out Bowie. When you see that, you know you're entering the city. And is there a possibility for doing something? It doesn't have to be the same thing, but something that really pops and says to the community, it's a placemaker, you're here. Because as we're trying to take these steps to improve the look of the town, to clean up the town, it may seem like a small thing, but those kinds of things start to cause a mental shift in how people think about their community. They'll stop littering. It's just one small step in another direction. So that is something, if everyone agrees, I think we should work toward as well in the new budget year. And especially with all that Councilmember Lundy's been doing with greening and cleaning up and, you know, trying to get trash off the communities. I mean, we're all trying to really just make the town look better.
So going back, wait a minute. Okay, so going back, there we are. So what's the mayor and council's recommendation on compensation then? Are we adding PW director now or waiting or adding 1 or 2 public works employees? What's the, I guess?
So it sounded like there was agreement, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, agreement to do a needs assessment for the director position. But in the short term, we can't ignore that we need more hands on deck. And so to go ahead with a lower line employee for public works.
Just one right now? Or?
I mean, I'd love to, honestly, but I'm looking at the council to see, would you all be comfortable or want to start small, go with 1? And then we just like with the police department, we didn't do all the positions at one time. We prioritized and started working through those. So if
Mayor
1
King.
is acceptable, yes, Councilmember Lundy.
I think Mr. Purnell had recommended 2. That would be good. You correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Purnell. In lieu of, excuse me, the full-time, in lieu of the full-time public works director position now pending the needs assessment.
Yes, Mr. Hall.
Yes, ma'am. That's
Okay.
yes, ma'am, council member. That is what we I recommended, was 2 right now. and then you do your needs assessment, you know, for what type of public work director you're really looking for, and the scope of work that he would be doing in the town of Bladensburg, as Vito said, a broad scope of work when you're looking for a public works director.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hall. So the question is, do we want to go with one or two? I mean, as we said, we have to fund all these positions, so I'd love to, but if we have to start with one, would appreciate that support. Councilmember Rout, I see your hand.
Thank you so much, Mayor James. I thought I was kind of clear for my recommendation that we need a director and that is actively hands-on to be able to support the needs of the town. And given that the engineer position is a contracted position, once that director gets in, we may not need the contractor engineer out. That director may be able, so it's moving from a contract to a full-time FTE. We also heard from our Acting Town Administrator Chief Collington, who supports the need for a director and an additional staff. So I'm not understanding why we can't have write the PD for a director to be active and to lead the actual team, which would increase our current staff from 5 to 7. And that would be an adequate support to really map out the labor as it relates to the division of labor. I think that we have budgeted in the past for a director, and our town has definitely taken the hit. I've heard from our taxpaying residents, and they would like a director. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rout. So, Mr. Tonelli, I think we have the direction to move forward. Again, the desire of the council is to do the needs assessment for the position of a director, but to also increase this area with the manpower of adding one more inline worker.
That's the only change, is the one worker
Those
for
two.
now. What?
2. So it's 2 positions. It's just, we're not going to hire that director on July 1. It's going to take several months to go through the needs assessment, get input.
So
We may not get them until October or November, but it should still go in the FY22 budget.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And I believe
Understood.
where we left off was
I have
with,
a question, Ms. James.
apologies, Councilmember Lundy. Yes, please.
Okay. Please forgive me if I am misspeaking, because I might not know if this even needs to be talked about during the budget, but I definitely would like the council support on this. And since we're in budget time, so I see a need in the community in the Ward 2 area, especially where I live on 58th Avenue, the need for handrails for our seniors, as well as handicapped people, older folk, or just people in need. Now, I understand that's the development of the management company. I understand that. So I guess we can talk about this offline, or at our council meeting, I can bring this up, but I don't know if they would need financial support or what have you. But I would just want to put it out there that based on the fact that recently my husband fell and hit his head on the gate, on one of the fences, and on the concrete last year. And his therapist had, in coming to work with him, she had said that this development, as well as the developments around the area, need to have guardrails or handrails for people to hold on to as they're walking down these steps so they don't fall. So I would just need to get the guidance. Would this be something that we would look at as a budget, or will we bring this up in a mayor council meeting? So I just want direction.
So in this specific example, the incident occurred on private property. And so if that's a conversation we want to have with our apartment complexes about safety measures for residents, then absolutely, I think we should. But as it relates to the budget, that's not necessarily a budget item for the Public Works Department. But I think you're right. It's certainly a very important safety concern that we can help advocate for our residents.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Tonelli, the next item we have up here is street lights. And can you just refresh us on where we are? Because I know we have grant money for the 57th Avenue project, the streetlights there. And I know because of staffing, we haven't been able to move forward with that. But can you just refresh us on that project versus what this is for the streetlights?
Okay, what this is for the streetlights is the cost, it's roughly $4,000. Let's say $4,500. Okay, and back up a little bit. This is what we pay Pepco for the streetlights in town because we're responsible for them. And then Pernell, you can help me out. Where are all the streetlights in town that we pay for? I know there's a, you go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. All the street lights in town, as Vito was saying, is the Pepco property. The only town-owned street lights we have is at the park and along the bridge on Bladensburg Road.
So any town streets you see street lights on, the town pays for them. In the wintertime months, when the days are shorter, nights are longer, we pay like almost $5,000 a month. As the days get shorter in the summer, it goes down to below $4,000 a month. And that's just for the power, for the lights, but Pepco does maintain them. I believe if that's correct. Now the lights, we have community legacy money, $150,000 right now, still in works to replace the streetlights on 57th Avenue. And I asked our town engineer, because we're short-staffed, to go ahead and start on this project because now's the time to do it because it's the summertime months. But we're focused on completing 58th Avenue first and then jumping right back into the streetlight projects on 57th and 58th.
Great. Thank you for that update, Mr. Tonelli.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're coming up on 11 and we do need to transition to public comments. So
let me just
want to go ahead and wrap up here.
Okay, I was going to say I can just touch on. We only got a few major ones left. Landfill fees. That's our disposal fees for. Let's say anytime we have like our food giveaways or anything, we do generate some waste that has to go to the landfill, and it's also for our what the Public Works collects around town as well. We have our sanitation contract in here, which they cover their own landfill fees as part of the contract. Janitorial services to clean all the buildings. And then you have utilities, shop supplies. Let's get down to capital, what we're talking about with the trucks. What we have in here is for a new single axle dump truck. I know that, I've heard the council's concerned about, the rusted out trucks and everything. These trucks are used every day, I hate to say it, but I drive a rusted out truck too, and it works great. So, but, it's not the image I get, I understand, but we do need a new single axle dump truck. This one is getting close to its end of its, it's going to start having some major repair issues. You're talking about like these big lifting cylinders and everything else with a truck. And we haven't added any new, as we said, Public Works unfortunately isn't on a fleet replacement plan as, we've done with the other department, with public safety. I won't say that they got forgotten about, but they, use their vehicles every day to, for the good. And as Councilmember Rout said, hopefully it might be a stretch, just waiting on the final language for that federal COVID-related grant because, Public Works and health and safety are what it's all about. So hopefully there could be some funds in there, Again, it could be a stretch, maybe not. So, I'm all for it, but for the meantime, I feel comfortable keeping at least one truck in on our budget and maybe look at the other funds for replacement for the other vehicles. But yes, the need is there, it's not the image we want to portray, but it's what we get along with every day to get the job done though too. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I mean, it's, again, this is, up to the mayor and council.
Yeah, thank you
Question.
for that recommendation, Mr. Tonelli. Councilmember Lundy.
Yes, as we wrap up, under line item 6790, janitorial services, and considering the public health and reopening, is this enough money? As I recently attended a Prince George's County municipal meeting and talking about doing a thorough cleaning. And I see 29,000 for the FY 2022 budget. So is this enough money to bring in a professional like a BioClean or something to make sure that our buildings are safe as our public re-enters once we talk about all of that? I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Lundy. Mr. Tonelli, do you or Chief or Mr. Hall want to address the thoughts there?
Probably no, if you're bringing in additional service on top of what we are already have here. Pernell can jump in too, but with the other funds coming down, I'm sure that would definitely be an allowable expense to bring in. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Hall. We saw you on mute.
Yes, we was talking about the janitor service, right? Line item 6790.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and we back to we don't like to throw numbers around, but we just don't go out and get quotes for something that we know is not going to exist, because when you need these contractors, oh no, they just out here trying to get quotes. Okay, so on a number on something like that, sure, you would need to add more. We don't know a physical concrete number, but what we're doing now is we're trying to itemize the budget, so we just throw numbers out there that we know will complete the job. So with that being said, on line item 67 janitor service, 29,000 may need to go up to another 10,000, the type of environment and that we are rolling to now.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. But I think we would definitely be able to use some of the American Recovery Act funds to support the additional needs. I mean, that's the whole goal of it, helping small governments like ours, helping small businesses because of COVID. And so if this amount is not sufficient, just know that would be definitely something that could be covered through those grant funds. So we wouldn't have to compromise safety and cleanliness because we need more than the $29,000. So I just want to make sure you were aware of that.
Exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Councilmember Rout?
Yes, thank you, Mayor James. I'm going to lower my hand. It was also suggested by, I don't know if this would come up under equipment, grounds, but there were a couple of suggestions from some new residents in Ward 1 that basically have commented as it relates to the broken glass in our streets, like on our sidewalk areas. I see we have our public works team out there with, the pickers and the sweeps and the things. In the 21st century, there are other municipalities in Maryland that have like street sweepers. So I'm not sure if this would be something that we could use another stretch, but because of cleanliness, maintaining our sidewalks, our gutter, we have a huge issue with our flooding and our rain mitigation. I've done a couple drives in Ward 1 just to look at our gutters and those street sweepers will ensure that there's a lot of rain in our drains. So I wanted to bring it to the attention of the town council because that is another added benefit to beautification, making sure that our roads and our streets remain clear. And so I wanted to address that here in this budget cycle meeting. I think we could be able to get away with either renting a street sweeper or street sweeping contract or something. But because those residents did reach out to me, I wanted to mention it here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rout. So back to you, Mr. Tonelli, to wrap us up.
And also in here is the highway user projects, which offsets the highway user revenue funds coming in, assuming that we will have, and we do have projects identified, and just to see if it all gets done. And anything unused here will, as we talked about in previous meetings, any unused highway user revenues will be deferred to future years. And you can defer those revenues up to 10 years. Because, you know, if you get into a major project, it'll consume 200% of your revenues. So it's nice to, you know, that we can build this fund because we do have, I forget how many miles of roadways that we have in town, but, you know, unfortunately, you know, I'm always worried about that large sinkhole that's going to open up somewhere, you know, so it's nice to have those funds set aside or set back for, you know, for emergency replacements as well as for ongoing maintenance, in, you know, residential areas and industrial areas. So that is me wrapping up our final department, and you can see our handy dandy pie chart here of, you know, and this is going to change some based on what we just talked about, but this is more for just to show that public safety and public works represents over 80% of our budget. And that's why I always say we're a service industry, because we provide a service to the residents. And we keep the general and administrative costs down, which are your mayor and council, town admin, clerk, and finance, under 20%. You know, so residents can get more bang for your buck, basically, because we are trying to provide a service to the residents in an efficient and effective manner. And that's all I really have. The rest of the
Tonelli?
Yes.
I had a question. If you could scroll back up, did the contract for waste management, did it increase? Or is that the normal cost? It says right here, 200,000. That it looked like there was an increase, but I'm not sure.
It is an increase. Well, it's the same budget as a previous year. I'm sorry, current year. And this is based on if we go out and we get bids to renew the contract. I think we're going to be facing higher costs if we do, because we are approaching or at the end of our current sanitation contract.
Didn't we put that, wasn't it supposed to go out for a bid already last fiscal year?
Yes.
And we pulled that back?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And now we're just on a
Like a month to month?
Yeah. And it's actually I'd say it's a very good deal, because I think that the tipping charges have increased, fuel has increased. But again, you know, it sounds like, you know, that if we are looking at doing our own service too. So this is a time to really look at all this, but $200,000 is a good placeholder for now.
Okay.
As long as we don't change the scope of the service or the delivery, and then we have to go back and look and adjust and everything else.
Do you have the figures for what the current contract is worth?
Current contract, I think I want to say is somewhere, I don't have it in front of me. I'm going to say it's probably 180,000, somewhere in that range. And that includes the twice a week residential collection, as well as I want to say 21 dumpsters, I believe, around town, in our condo and office and our town buildings and everything.
So our current contract is worth 180, but we put in our budget 200. Can you share the reason why?
In case if we go out and rebid the service.
So Councilmember Rao, what Mr. Tonelli was saying, because of fuel costs and other fees going up, he wanted to budget for that rather than putting in the same amount and finding that the cost for services has gone up and we're over budget in trying to get a new vendor in here.
Okay, that's
I mean, I can walk it back.
That's not our current estimated contract. So if we haven't rebid that out, we haven't, I mean, it just makes sense to keep it at what we currently have. Our fuel going up in our month-to-month contract? Because that's $20,000 of savings that we could put towards a foreman. I'm just trying to be, look to rebalance what we actually need. And we know that the foreman is a need. And so an extra $20,000 sitting in a sanitation 6750 line item, to me, really doesn't make any sense.
And given what you stated, because it is in the Public Works budget, if there is a differential and that funding needs to be pulled to go to employees' health insurance or salaries and so forth, because it's in the same department budget, that can be done. It doesn't require a budget amendment. So it's still, to your point, in there if needed for that FTE position, one or the two. So, Mr. Tonelli, thank you for walking us through everything. I just want to scroll down because on my view, the council members are on different windows. I don't see any other hands raised at this time. And so do want to open it up to the public comments. Did you receive them in writing? And if not, we can just go to the residents on the line and give them the opportunity to share their input.
I just see on the chat there, just talking about the Chief just said we have 7 miles of roadways to maintain in town. Probably didn't see that. That's some great info right there. So it's a lot to maintain. That's why this, I'm glad we spent the time on Public Works budget, just because, it's not only 7 miles roadway, it's also the parks, it's the buildings, it's everything else. So it's a valuable department, and it's very much, but sometimes we won't talk about it enough, maybe.
I would agree. So with that, I'll just go down the line, and Mr. Tonelli, if you wouldn't mind, so I don't lose track of the time. I think we normally do 3 minutes for public comment, and Councilmember Lundy just put a message in the chat as well. Thank you for that. So we'll just go down the line. We have, it's not a full name, it just says Blade. So if that resident wishes to speak on the budget. And if you would be so kind to turn on your mic and camera when you speak, just so the council can see our residents. I'll keep going. Moving down to Mr. Steve White. Mr. Whites, did you have any comments at this time?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to thank Councilmember Lundy for joining us from Belize. This might be the first international Zoom meeting we've had here.
You mean Councilmember Rout?
I mean Rout, I'm sorry. But yeah, I have a few questions, and I agree with the Public Works Director there. I'm glad you brought that up. There's several things in Bladensburg that really aren't clear at this point. The stormwater drains, open culverts, we've had trouble with that overflowing and causing some flooding. And I know the town staff has talked to somebody in the county. I'm not sure what department it is, but they said, well, we'll clean it out, but we're not going to make repairs. I'm not clear on exactly what they will do or won't do for us. And they seem to be saying, basically, it's a town's responsibility to maintain the open culverts. So a Public Works Director, I think, would be needed for maybe something like that. There's a number of sidewalk repairs needed. A number of street signs are missing in town, and some of those would be state highway on Annapolis Road, but one in particular there is, I think it's 55th Avenue. It's a traffic light on Annapolis Road. There's not an adequate street sign. There's a small sign on the phone pole there, but we need a big street sign across the street where people can actually see it. Down on 48th Street, there's a Quincy Place with no street sign. That's where the town bank is there. And another concern is Quincy Street, the cement gutter. You know, that there's a dirt gutter there that just pours water out into the road and freezes in the wintertime. I'm not clear if that cement gutter is included in that Quincy Street project to put a sidewalk in, repave. Also, you have the bridge there that the mayor talked about problems with. So there's a number of problems, you know, that we need to address that I guess the public works director would be able to handle. Mayor mentioned trash removal. Chevrolet does their own trash removal. We've had a number of problems with trash cans left in the street. I'm concerned on Tilden Road, cars racing down, police cars, fire trucks going down the street, and you have street trash cans out in the street after pickup and blocking the sidewalk. So I think that a lot of these issues would be taken care of by Public Works Director. And I'm not clear, did you say that we are going to hire a Public Works Director and one Public Works worker? Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Weitz, that is what we were proposing today.
Oh, good. Okay. And then I have some line item questions here on page 2. Excuse me. It says grants restricted minus 100%. And then on page 3, it says line item 4900 appears to be all of the grants. And it looks to me like you were saying in the past we budgeted a total of 600,000 in grants. This year we're proposing no grant money. And I'm not quite sure why we wouldn't want to be getting any grant money. And then the transfer from fund balance is currently 346,000. So that would be increased with a hiring of a Public Works Director and another Public Works worker. So, and another thing, back in April 25, okay, you want to look at that first? Maybe you want to answer that as we go.
So, Mr. Weitz, normally with the public comments, we, similar to the council meetings, take the questions in so that staff can appropriately look into them and then follow up with you with the answers. So we're taking notes on all the questions that you're presenting at the moment.
Okay, so just go ahead with the questions.
Yes, please. We're jotting them all down.
Okay, good. April 25th, I sent Vito and I copied the town council email asking about the $7 million we expect to get, I guess, from federal money. And I'm not clear on that. Is this definitely approved? Will we be definitely getting that? And are there restrictions on how that money can be spent? Because I know, you know, we got that COVID money and there was some restrictions on what you can spend it on. It has to be items that aren't budgeted for the COVID money. So is that the case for this $7 million? And so as I understand, it probably means the monies that we spend from that 7 million can't be money that was already budgeted in our budget. I think that that's what you're saying. And is there a time limit on when that 7 million needs to be spent? Okay. And could some of that 7 million be spent on these road repairs, street signs, things that we need, like stormwater drains, different items like that. So, and by the way, I didn't get any email response to those questions on the 7 million. So that email was sent April 25th, if you want to refer to that. Going on to the next page. I understand you're saying the social media person will be moved from the town administrator budget to the town clerk budget. And I'm looking at the town administrator compensation, item 6010, regular pay for FY21 was 121,000, and FY22 budget, it's still 121,000, even though you're removing the social media person. So I would think there would be a decrease in that line item for pay, since you don't have the social media person there anymore. That's my question on that. And that's on page 5, line item 6,000 or 6010. Okay, and then on page 6, 6010, compensation for town clerk budget, you're adding the social media person to that town clerk budget. And I'm wondering, we have an increase of 5% regular pay. Will that cover the addition of the social media person's salary? And, you know, I'm assuming the social media person is probably a part-time position. I don't know how many hours that is, but, you know, I'm just wondering, that's an increase. So it's 8. That's an increase of only, I think, if I'm reading right, $10,000 more for a social media person. So I'm wondering if that regular pay is adequate to cover the social media person's salary. And then on page 7, line item 6010 increased 11. And I'm assuming that part of that is the COLA raise or merit raise, but part of that increase, I think, if I'm reading it right, is increased for payout for the finance clerk who will be retiring that in this coming year, if I'm understanding that right. And okay, that's finance budget. And let's see, page number 8. We have automatic traffic enforcement speed cameras, 100,000. That's line item 6590. And it looks like we didn't get any speed cameras last year, but I'm glad to see you're still budgeting it for this year. And there's a big need for speed cameras around the schools. I live on Tilden Road. We constantly have people speeding down the road here. So I'm concerned about that. I think I'm still with you. Yeah, okay.
Hey, Mr. Weitz, you're going like way over time. The council okay to keep going, or I just, you know, I'm supposed to be a timekeeper, but you know, I just wanted to jump in now.
I appreciate it, and since
I hate to cut them off, but
yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you keeping track of the time. But Mr. White, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead if the council's okay and let him finish up because I don't see any other residents waiting. And that way we can get the responses to Mr. White's questions. And when we have our work session on June 14th and we discuss the budget again, we'll go through each of these. We typically address those resident concerns in that meeting to make sure that you understand exactly where things are as it relates to line items, budgets, and get the proper responses to your questions. So Mr. White, could you please continue and we'll wrap up right after you're done.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And if I'm reading this right, page 15, you have a list of the employees, and I'm counting in the police department, we have 33 police officers, communications, admin, and then 2 code enforcers. And we had 3 code enforcers, and I think Cruz moved to the police department. So now we're down to 2 code officers. Is that a permanent shift there, or will we go back to 3 code officers? And the total of 33 police officers and 2 code officers, is that an increase over the number of policemen we had in the previous year? You know, I appreciate our police and it's much needed. So I'm glad that we're organizing the police and taking care of that department. And I think also one of the code officers is may still be working on the Saturday, which you have a lot of building projects without permits. So I appreciate that if that continues. And let's see, then page 10. Yeah, the road maintenance, there's potholes. I think we mentioned the street signs, number of items needed. The drain, the street water drain pipe underground is broken down there on 48th Street by, I guess it's somewhere around the area of Mango Cafe. And that's, I guess, a state highway project. We need to continue to get that fixed, because that if you look at this curb there along 48th Street next to, you know, that little intersection behind the bank, one street drain is clogged up, another one has a temporary steel plate over it, and that is continually clogging up. That needs to be fixed. And I'm also glad to hear we're increasing the public works employees. I've felt sorry for public works for some time. I think they're overworked, and get a public works director would help a lot. I know over there by the high school, I think it's 58th Street. They've been working on that for quite a long time, doing studies. And I never did quite understand what was wrong with the street, but that's been dragging on for a long time. If we had a public works director, we might be able to finish that easier. And then, okay, page 11, property rental. I know we have the Mango Cafe. Is that the only rental building we own? And let's see.
All right, Mr. White. Well, was there anything else? Because we do want to move on to the next item. I want to be respectful of folks' time.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it.
Okay.
And, I appreciate. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing. At the previous meeting, we brought up the constant yield rate. And I know that they advertise that in the Bowie Blade. I don't know how many people get that newspaper. but I asked that it be publicized in the town news email, and I've never seen it publicized in the town news email. I think it should be advertised locally. That's part of the guidelines of public meetings, that policy that we passed some time ago. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your input and the questions, Mr. White. And again, we'll be talking through the budget again at the work session on the 14th, and we'll address your questions at that time. So please, if you can join, that would be wonderful. If not, of course, it'll be recorded so you can play it back at a later time.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, sir, absolutely. And so with that, I'm trying to switch screens.
And I'd like to say, I love somebody's paying attention. The residents are paying attention to everything. So, hopefully more people are doing that as well too. I assume they are. So I appreciate that, Mr. Whites.
Exactly. And I think by putting the meetings on things like our YouTube page and Facebook, if people can't make it this morning, it's okay. They can watch the meeting and then still have time to write us, email the staff, or provide public comments for the June 14th meeting, because we want to hear from more residents, that's for sure. We want to get more input and make sure that this budget is what the greater amount of residents are looking and coming to expect. Councilmember Rout, I see your hand raised.
Thank you so much, Mayor James. I lowered my hand. I would like to ask for an asset list in understanding our assets, because as a council member, I don't understand what assets do we have that generate income, because I see that we only have the Mango Cafe, but I know we own additional properties. And so that would definitely be helpful to further understand as a part of the budgeting process, so that we can see if we need to sell any assets or purchase any additional assets. I mean, I'm used to assets being a part of a budgeting process, and understanding this budget, we don't have those noted. So I'm just very interested in understanding has that ever been done? I know there's other municipalities that do have a running total or looking at assets, and so that we can adequately plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rout. Mr. Tonelli?
That is a very good work session topic. Our assets, we have a full asset list by activity, by just to show you. And then this is audited every year. This is part of our audit. We go through some of our assets are, like our buildings. I'm just showing you real quick what a fixed asset list looks like. We have, book value is 5.6 million of assets at the end of FY20, less depreciable basis of 3.2 million. So the total book value you see in the audit is a cost less the accumulated depreciation of the assets. And this is a really good work session topic. If I could share, the assets are broken down by buildings, or they're broken down by vehicles, equipment, computers, software. So we do keep a full list. I mean, you can see some things on here. We have disposed of a lot, meaning stuff like pre-2005, things that have just, we know we've disposed of. We do a vehicle inventory to make sure, the vehicles on the road and the vehicles in the pool match the list. And, it goes back to the original acquired cost, as you can see. But I like to go over this, in its own separate work session. But this is part of the audit every year because it's a big, I want to say it's on like page 6 or 7 or 8 of the audit. And this is something that's looked at every year. And we update this annually. We generally don't go out and buy assets constantly all the time. We can pull from the financials, see we bought 3 assets or 4 assets a year, and they're usually vehicles and associated equipment or handheld radios, or if it's like your computer purchases under $1,000, not really something that's going to qualify here. This is more over 1,000, 2,500. So you're looking at more of your servers or your larger equipment that's going to last longer.
And Mr. Tonelli, when you walk us through it, because it may not be familiar to everyone, it would be helpful if you just kind of talk about depreciating assets and how, you know, how that's done, just so everyone, I don't want to assume everyone, you know, knows those kinds of things, but if you wouldn't mind adding it to the next work session, or if it's too much, and like you said, we need to do a separate 1 hour work session on that, I think it would be beneficial, not just to the council, but to our residents and really understanding town assets.
I'm thinking maybe July would be a good work session for it, because I think, you know, as the topics have come up, you know, last month and into this month, I think we're looking at more of a full work session already for June. Something we'll talk about for you all in the council meeting next week, you know, if we're still going on August recess, you know, so that's the other thing, you know, or, you know, so we'll schedule it definitely. We'll schedule it definitely. And of course, I love talking about it. You know, it is a big piece of what we have. I mean, you look around, everything's an asset, you know, but it also includes all the historical assets as well, as Councilmember Rout says, you know, so it's everything just piled on since 1954, I'd like to say. So, you know, but yeah.
Thank you. Okay, fantastic. All right, so we have wrapped up Public Works departmental budget. We've provided input on things that the town council would like to see added there. We heard from public comments today. And so as we get ready to wrap up, I know when we come together in that work session on the 14th, we still will be discussing the budget and giving further comments to it. But just want to thank everyone for joining this morning and ask if there are any final questions before we adjourn. So I'm not sure if everyone saw the chat, but a couple of the council members did ask for the asset list to be emailed, and it just saw the response coming up. Mr. Tonelli did say he would share that with everyone. So just want to make sure everyone on the council was aware. We'll get an email copy. And as he said, I believe it's also in the audit as well, the audit booklet that we received.
Mayor James?
Yes, Councilmember.
It's in the audit, but just a summary of it. And when I email it to you, I'll do like a crosswalk to how it goes, you know, to where it is in the audit, walking back to the full schedules that, you know, that I'll send you all.
Thank you. Councilmember Blunt?
And I did understand you say that we'll be able to go back over the whole budget.
Councilmember Blunt, we cannot hear you. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Yeah, you did say that we'll be able to talk about things in the budget that we don't agree upon and make changes. We'll have enough time to talk about that.
Right, so I was just calling for additional questions. So if you would like to go ahead, Councilmember Blunt.
Yes, I wanted to talk about the 6260 transportation. You there?
Yes.
Okay, we had our Pottstown quarterly meeting. There was a lot of questions raised about the transportation of the bus. I see that we have a line item of $38,000 in there for that. But
Councilmember Blunt, we can hardly hear you.
Yeah,
I don't know. Hello?
There you go.
It starts out good, and then when you continue, I'm sorry, it's like we lose your audio.
Well, I wanted to talk about the transportation budget line item for $30,000.
Okay.
Because we had at the quarterly meeting, we talked about that, and we was going to get together with the other towns who used the van. However, that's been very successful. They have not called me back. I have tried to set up several meetings so we could discuss the transportation. So I'm not comfortable with anything at this time for transportation because no one is getting back in touch with me. I asked for 4 meetings and it was a big concern about people spending $100 versus we spending $38,000. So I don't know what the holdup is, but I don't feel comfortable with that line item at this point. And I hope you heard me.
So at this point, is your recommendation to zero out that line item?
Until we have, I can talk with someone. I set up several meetings. I talked with Rob Bonds. He sent out emails to have a meeting so that we can come up with a solution. But to say we're gonna add this money and there's still no solution to how the bus is being ran, I don't feel comfortable as I'm spending the our money for what?
Okay.
If it's not being used.
I definitely understand fully. My only recommendation would be just leave it in there, but we're not agreeing to continue with that until you all actually have a meeting, because if you all do get together in July or August and it's zeroed out, that's a different challenge now, trying to go back and put money in the budget. So that would just be my recommendation, to leave it, not increase it, but have the understanding that we're not participating, in renewing our agreement with this program until you all, because that's what was agreed, you all would talk about it, come to agreement on how things would proceed. So that would be my only recommendation. If we pull it and then we approve the budget and then have to come back, where's that money going to come from?
And I understand that, but can we, like you say, we won't participate unless they give us clarification on how this money is going to be spent, because we're spending money. No one's riding the bus. We're taking the bulk of it. And why? Why do we need a bus if we don't have no consistency of who's using the bus, how much we're being charged? So, okay, I mean, I agree with that.
And not to mention the maintenance. So I feel
Can we keep
bad
it the same level?
Yeah, I would recommend not increasing it.
Okay.
But the downside of it, Councilmember Blunt, too, is those residents who haven't done anything wrong are being hurt because people are dragging their feet and not being able to meet and keep this going. Many of those seniors depend on those trips to go get their groceries,
Right.
medications. So
I mean, I understand all that you're saying, but that was not said at the quarterly meeting.
Mm-hmm.
How many people are using the bus? 5 people? That's my understanding, 5 people. So when you talk about only 5 people using that bus and we're spending $20,000 for 5 people, where do it make sense? So yeah, we can leave. Yes. So we have no.
Emerson, I'm sorry.
5.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to find out, who's actually using the bus, the Carla bus in the town of Bladensburg. We know Parkview very seldom use it. Newton Green very seldom use it. So who's using the bus? And no one is coming to the table. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but no one's trying to come to a table with a resolution of how, who, and what, and why we're spending $38,000 for a bus for 5 people.
And I think, Councilmember Blunt, I hate to be, this curt with it, but I'm pretty positive if that's the kind of email that you sent to the folks who agreed to work on this, to say Bladensburg is not going to continue, so you can no longer count on our funding, I guarantee you they would come back and respond very quickly, because they have to know this is urgent. Yes. And we can't wait, until December. We need to know something now. We met back in April.
I know, and I told Rod that we're on budget season. We have to come to something, because yes, we know these 5 people use the Carla bus, but you're talking about one of the towns complained about spending $1,200. We're spending $38,000. Right. So for 5 people, just give me something. That's all.
And honestly, I feel like there's probably, if there's not agreement to continue, we need to just figure out a solution for Bladensburg residents. And that way we're taking out other factors and just we're better able to audit and track the services go to this resident and you know, without having to involve 3 other municipalities. So, I mean, that's why I also say at the end of the day, if you leave that money in there, at least you have something to work with if that falls through and we need to look at another solution, whether it's we contract a particular, we have local bus companies in town.
Yes.
Why can't we hire them
Yes.
to provide the service, and then we're supporting our local businesses?
Yes.
So
I agree 100%. And again, I'm for buying our own bus, but I'm just saying.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Just know you got a supporter here for that. But thank you for bringing that up. Okay. I'm sorry.
Mayor
So
James?
I'd lost Councilmember Lundy on my screen. Let me just make sure she didn't have a question. Councilmember Lundy, I'm trying to find you. Okay. Councilmember Rout.
Yes, thank you, Mayor James. So I am in agreement with reducing the transportation line item in 6260. And hearing from my colleague and seeing some of her correspondence to the other partners, it doesn't make sense to keep that line item at $30,000 when we could be reallocating funds in other ways. I support your Mayor James' suggestion that we should be looking to adequately provide a service on a monthly basis to our residents who are in need through maybe we can, you know, we have a 16 passenger van. So if there's currently 5 people, I would even volunteer on one day that I'm off during the week to just drive them as a service to our community using our 16 passenger van. There's different ways that we can look into mitigating this and not expensing money. I do feel that based on the information that was shared at that meeting in April, that we have wasted some of our resources, especially during COVID. The bus was running. The bus was pulled over and we still had to pay the driver because of maintenance concerns on the bus. It didn't feel good understanding that taxpayers' expenses were being wasted, and I'm going to use that word in particular. So I would like to see this line item reduced, possibly cut in half or a third, or I mean, it just needs to significantly be reduced. And still, since we are here on this town of Bladensburg, I just wanted to have an understanding of the $18,000 that we put in as an increase for the fireworks. To my recollection, the last time we met, there was a response to say that, no, we can't have the fireworks display because of COVID. So I'm just trying to understand, can we have it? Can we not have it? Because I think it's timely so that we can be able to make that decision. We don't need to have $18,000 sitting in a line item. If we're not going to be using that, we could use that money somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rout, for both points. So going back to you, Councilmember Blunt. So what is the amount that you want to either to levelize or reduce for the transportation cost, just so Mr. Tonelli can make the appropriate adjustment?
I mean, I think if we have time and if we send another email out, or I send another email out and don't get a response, and can I get back to you?
Sure, because we have time. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then with respect to the question about the fireworks, my understanding is, so we can't use park and planning, which is odd because the county is opening back up. So that to me is not consistent, but I'll respect that's what their response is. So my question is, would you all be open to doing something similar? For instance, you could have drone displays that mimic fireworks that we could still do and keep the same theme of doing something for the town, having viewing locations so we're not having huge crowds together. The other option is laser light shows, which also mimic fireworks. The nice thing is you don't have the ashes or any sort of need for fire trucks and things like that because there's
Fire marshal.
Yes, and so I feel like Councilmember Rout and I were saying this previously at a budget meeting. It's time to get our community out and together safely. And this could be a nice opportunity to accomplish that, but not, again, not having everyone all at the same location. We could have viewing sites. The county is doing their 100 days of summer and wants to partner with us. So those resources would be available to us. But I think it's worth having something for Independence Day, even if it's not the traditional fireworks at the waterfront park. So I would recommend leaving that in there. And I'm happy to research, what companies do that, who is available, and bring that to the June meeting so we can make a decision. Because the other thing is, if that's not enough to cover it, if they're talking $100,000, then we can just X that out of the budget, and just tell everyone, let's just meet throughout town and watch the DC fireworks. So if that sounds okay, I can get information on those alternatives.
Mayor James, I have some information. I'll email you as it relates to the drone. I was going to plan something for my family, and it's definitely more than 18,000. So because the drones are individual. I mean, it depends on how big or small you want to use it. So I'll share the company that I had got a quote from. It's a company in Delaware.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Mayor James, you talked about the park and planning property, and you also brought up before. I mean, we have 7 or 9 acres of Boswick property too. That is, a great launching. I don't want to say launching ground, but it's a great entertainment ground. It could be, it's town property that it's would showcase that property as well.
Right, and the reason I mentioned that as a possible point for launching, the laser light show, or if we could do drones, is because, as you said, it's ours, so we don't have to get permission from park and planning or from the state or some other entity. And it would give us greater flexibility. And then not only that, but it's at an elevated point back where the orchards are. And so if they're using that as their launch point, if you will, it makes it easier for everyone in town to see whatever the display is because of the highest elevation, well, not highest, but a high elevation launch point there. So it was just an idea. Again, we'll try to get information to bring to the work session. And then one other thought I had going back to the town administrator budget as it relates to contractual services, is our master plan has been sitting since our last full-time town administrator was there, and we need some investment in having an economic development person who's really pushing that plan forward and helping. So we are getting revitalization on our main corridor. And with bringing in a new town administrator, they're going to have their hands full with the more critical things, the trash contract and getting staff hired and those kinds of things, and wanted to recommend that we put funding in for hiring someone to contract on the economic development to really, that's all they do. We're not asking them to check timesheets or anything else. They're meeting with the county, meeting with the state, going to federal partners, trying to bring funding back to our area to really help change the look of our town and bring us into the 21st century. And then the other one was, I said this when I first got elected, I strongly feel that we need to have an HR person, and there are individuals who are trained and educated in human resources who we can contract with to take that off of the treasurer, so that we're making sure we're following HR guidance as it relates to county policy, state policy, because we're doing the best we can, and I can't take anything away from Vito, but you need someone there who's really managing the staff side. We need not just annual reviews of staff, but someone needs to have professional development plans for our staff. So we're putting money in the professional development budget, but who's sitting there and really working with them to make sure that they're getting the appropriate trainings and then bringing that back and actually implementing it for the benefit of our residents. We're missing some key connection points. And then even when it comes to disciplinary methods, depending on your supervisor, how do we know discipline's being applied equally? How do we know it's being applied consistently? we don't have someone who has that as their sole focus. And because of that, we could be setting ourselves up for lawsuit from staff because they may feel, well, my supervisor favors me, but you know, someone else, Ms. Brown's supervisor is way more strict, and that opens us up to litigation. So I strongly recommend that we consider putting funding in there for a contractor. Mr. Tonelli, if you could just see what would be feasible for those and just bring them back. So at least the council can see what numbers, what they look like. And if we agree, we put that in.
Okay.
And those were the last two things that I had, but I definitely, again, appreciate everyone joining today. I don't see any other raised hands. And so with that, we'll just thank you all for joining and ask for a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
Moved by Councilmember Blunt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Rout. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, let it be known by the saying of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? The ayes have it. Again, thank you all for joining. Be safe out there and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.